Welcome back. Now we're talking about wide receivers who I think you should start and sit for week 11. And first and foremost should come to no surprise, Dwayne Bowe of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's had at least one touchdown in the last 5 or 6 games, so very productive. Had a good week last week, a high number of receptions with 13 last week. Now, that's not his norm, being that the most receptions he's had thus far up until last week's game was 6 receptions. So he's good for a non-PPR league. Again, over the course of the season, he really hasn't had a lot of balls, or he's had a lot of balls thrown his direction. Maybe his receptions haven't been as high, but he's a good fantasy option, especially from a touchdown standpoint, being that he's definitely going to get in the end zone. Matt Castle is going to look for him, so I would recommend starting Dwayne Bowe. Okay. The second, I would recommend starting Mike Wallace for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Mike Wallace has had at least one touchdown in the last 4 to 5 games. In the last 2 games, he's had over 100 receiving yards. He's tied on the teams in receptions with Hines Ward at 30, and he leads the teams in targets. So you know Roethlisberger is going to look in his direction. He's one of the fastest receivers on the field as well as in the game, period. So expect him to stretch that field with Oakland. Nnamdi Asomugha is a little banged up. He should play, but again, he's possibly going to be matched up with Wallace, but expect Wallace to put it in second gear, get behind Nnamdi for at least a long play. I expect him to have at least one touchdown. I recommend starting Mike Wallace. Santonio Holmes. Now, Holmes was suspended for the first 4 games of the year, and so we recognize that. Now that he's starting to come a little more comfortable with the offense, giving Sanchez another option, I think he's going to be a big target this week at home against Houston. Houston's, as we all know, ranked 32nd, last in the league against the pass. Expect Holmes to get behind that secondary that's struggling. He's going to put up big numbers, ultimately taking balls away from Dustin Keller, maybe not so much from Braylon Edwards, but, I think in the long run, he is going to take balls away from Dustin Keller, but I would recommend starting Santonio Holmes. So let's move on to the wide receivers who I think you should sit. And first and foremost, I think you should sit Randy Moss of the Tennessee Titans. Now, last week on the road against Miami, Moss, 1 reception, 26 yards. While Moss is on the field, he's going to draw double coverage, whether he's 26 or 106. If Randy Moss is on the football field, he's going to have linebacker help. He's going to have safety help. He's always going to draw double coverage. With that being said, their MO is to run the ball. They want to run the ball. So bringing in Moss probably in some respects is a decoy, again, to take that other man, to take that safety, that extra linebacker out of the box, and so now Tennessee can look at 7-man fronts, 6-man fronts instead of these 8 and 9-man guys in the box. So again, I would recommend sitting Randy Moss. He will have some big production numbers as the weeks go on, and Tennessee is fighting to get into that playoff picture out of the AFC South. But I think right now, again, just in the second game with Tennessee, I don't expect him to be much of a factor this week. Robert Meacham for the New Orleans Saints is another wide receiver who I think you should sit down this week. Robert Meacham has what I call the Denver syndrome. I call it the Denver syndrome because in Denver, Eddie Royal is the odd man out. Kyle Orton throws the ball to Brandon Lloyd. He gets the ball to Jabari Gaffney. Eddie Royal just gets the table scraps. Well, there's a bigger pie in New Orleans, but there's also more people at the table. With Drew Brees throwing the ball around the Colston, Lance Morris-Shockey, and now with Reggie Bush coming back, again, Reggie Meacham's going to be the odd man out. Plus, Reggie Meacham, hasn't scored a touchdown since week 5 and 6. So Brees hasn't been looking his direction that often anyway. And again, with an additional weapon and Reggie Bush coming back, don't expect him to continue to look in. Well, don't expect him to look at Meacham often too much more now with more options on the field. So I would recommend sitting Robert Meacham. Thirdly, I recommend sitting Roy Williams. Talked about him last week. I'll talk about it again until Dallas shows me that maybe I shouldn't talk about him, at least in the sit segment. But he's currently he's the 4th option on the team behind Austin Bryant and Jason Witten. He's ironically tied on the team for first in touchdowns, but again, I think Kitna's going to have a good game at home against Detroit, so expect a lot of Kitna's balls to go to Jason Witten, go to Miles Austin, go to Dez Bryant. So Williams is going to be the odd man out again. He's going to be stuck like Chuck, like Robert Meacham, kind of like Eddie Royal is in Denver. So I would recommend sitting Roy Williams. These have been the wide receivers who I think you should start for Week 11. I'll be back with the tight ends who I think you should start and sit.